Imagine this. You're walking through a quiet neighborhood on a crisp autumn morning. Golden leaves flutter to the ground, and children's laughter echoes faintly in the distance. The world feels safe, familiar, comfortable. At the end of the street stands a man you once admired. A teacher, a mentor, the kind of person who once stayed after hours just to help a struggling student, who believed that character mattered more than ambition. Today he's in handcuffs, arrested for fraud, accused of exploiting the very people he once claimed to protect. Neighbors stare in disbelief. Reporters scramble for a statement. But all you can think is, how? How does someone like that become this? Now rewind. Go further back. Picture a young girl raised in a loving home, taught to be kind, to tell the truth, to never hurt others. She grows up and becomes a mid-level executive, known for her integrity, until one day she signs off on decisions that devastate thousands of families for the sake of a quarterly profit. She sleeps at night. She tells herself it's just how the system works. And maybe she's not wrong. Now pause. What if the monster we fear doesn't live outside us, but walks beside us, unnoticed in our smallest compromises, our quiet justifications, our need to belong, to win, to survive? What if goodness isn't a permanent trait, but a fragile state, one choice away from extinction? We've been told a lie, that evil wears horns, that bad people are born broken, that morality is a line etched clearly in the sand. But history mocks this notion. Time and again, it shows us something darker, more disorienting. The most horrifying acts have often come from people who once thought of themselves as good, who wore wedding rings, read bedtime stories, paid their taxes, people who prayed before doing things that would make your stomach turn, and you're left wondering, not about them, but you. What invisible lines have you already crossed without noticing? At what point does a white lie become a habit? When does silence in the face of injustice become a quiet approval? What do you tell yourself at night to stay innocent in your own eyes? Here's the paradox that burns beneath the surface. Goodness can decay not through malice, but through routine, through obedience, through apathy, through small decisions that stack like bricks until a wall stands between who you were and who you've become. It doesn't always happen in some dramatic moment of moral collapse. More often, it's slow erosion, a glance away when you should speak up, a promotion accepted at someone else's cost, a secret thought you never meant to entertain, until you do. And yet, we resist this idea. We cling to a myth of moral permanence, that good people stay good, that we are immune to darkness simply because we want to be. But want is not enough. Intentions rot under pressure. And no one is as dangerous as the person who believes they are incapable of cruelty, because they don't see it when it starts. So ask yourself, if you had been born in a different time, a different place, would you still be the good person you think you are? Would you have marched with the crowd or stood alone against it? The truth is, goodness is not inherited. It is chosen again and again against resistance, confusion, and even fear. But if that's true, then it also means something more chilling. It can be unchosen with equal ease. And if that's the case, then who are you, really? Are you the sum of your ideals or the sum of your actions when no one's watching? As you sit in this tension, a darker question emerges. One that doesn't just challenge how you see others, but how you see yourself. What if evil isn't the opposite of good, but its echo, a twisted reflection, born not from the void, but from the very light we cherish, corrupted by desire, fear, or belief? And if that's true, then no one is safe from the transformation, not the gentle, not the principled, not even you. So what is the force that turns good into bad? Is it power? Is it pain? Is it something deeper, buried in the architecture of the mind, the structure of society, or the very nature of the human soul? Whatever it is, it's not obvious, not loud. It whispers, it justifies, it waits, and if you're not careful, it becomes you, long before you ever realize it. Let's go deeper. Let's uncover the roots of this invisible transformation, because the real danger isn't in becoming bad, it's in not knowing when it happened. To understand how good people become bad, you must first abandon the comfort of seeing goodness as a shield, something that, once worn, protects you forever. It is not armor. It is a threadbare cloak, constantly torn by the jagged edges of fear, ambition, resentment, and silence. The transformation doesn't begin with hate, it begins with self-deception. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the disowned parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. Not just our rage, jealousy, or cowardice, but also our capacity for cruelty, our hunger for control, our quiet enjoyment of superiority. Jung warned that the more we deny the shadow, the more powerfully it governs us from beneath consciousness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is the first hidden truth. We are not as good as we think we are, and in trying to believe otherwise, we make ourselves dangerous. Think of the person who would never see themselves as capable of injustice. When challenged, they double down. Their goodness becomes performative. Their identity hinges on the illusion of virtue, and anyone who questions it is met with hostility. Morality, then, becomes a mask worn so tightly that the face underneath disappears. Friedrich Nietzsche took this even further. He warned that morality itself, when rooted in guilt, obedience, or herd conformity, can become a prison. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche suggested that the very structure of conventional goodness often conceals a will to power. People hide behind virtue not because they are selfless, but because it gives them moral leverage over others. The priest condemns desire not out of piety, but out of bitterness and impotence. The morally outraged citizen may not be righteous, but envious of those who act freely. Goodness, then, can be a disguise for resentment. Arthur Schopenhauer, ever the pessimist, saw human behavior as ruled not by reason, but by a blind, striving will, a craving that endlessly seeks satisfaction and is never appeased. We like to believe we act from noble causes, but often we are just dressing up our selfish drives in prettier language. Even acts of charity, Schopenhauer noted, often stem from a desire to feel superior, or to quiet the internal discomfort we feel at the suffering of others. So what happens when these unconscious forces, our shadows, our resentments, our unfulfilled will, meet the right conditions? They activate. Aldous Huxley saw how easy it is to manipulate the average person with fear, pleasure, or distraction. In Brave New World, he envisioned a society where people don't need to be coerced into submission. They choose it, because they've been numbed by comfort and conditioned to avoid pain at all costs. In such a world, evil doesn't look like tyranny, it looks like compliance. A quiet, smiling obedience to systems that degrade the soul. Which leads us to another terrifying truth. Sometimes badness doesn't come from rebellion, but from loyalty. Loyalty to an ideology, a group, a leader, a company, a cause. Jean-Paul Sartre explored this in Being and Nothingness, where he described the concept of bad faith, a state where a person lies to themselves in order to avoid freedom. They play roles. They act as if they have no choice, as if they're just doing their job, following orders, or being realistic. This self-deception lets them escape responsibility. And in doing so, they become complicit in things they would never consciously agree with, if only they were brave enough to confront themselves. Here's the core of the hidden problem. We trade self-awareness for security. To be truly good, we must constantly question ourselves, examine our motives, admit our flaws. But this is painful. It threatens our self-image. It makes us vulnerable. So instead, we construct false identities. The good parent, the loyal employee, the responsible citizen. We wrap ourselves in roles and narratives. We outsource our moral thinking to institutions, to cultural norms, to charismatic leaders. We stop asking why we do what we do, and that's when the descent begins, not as a fall, but as a drift. We don't notice it at first because the world rewards compliance. The systems we live in are not designed to cultivate virtue. They are designed to extract value, to prioritize performance, not introspection. Obedience, not integrity. In this environment, even those with noble intentions are slowly reshaped. A psychologist working under pressure begins fudging data. A soldier trained to dehumanize the enemy follows orders that haunt them later. A young activist, once driven by justice, becomes addicted to moral outrage and begins silencing anyone who disagrees. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz and author of Man's Search for Meaning, believed that human beings are fundamentally free, but only if they take radical responsibility for that freedom. He saw firsthand how ordinary people, placed in extreme situations, could either become saints or monsters. Between stimulus and response, he wrote, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But most of us never enter that space. We react, we conform, we justify, we sleepwalk into decisions that shape our character. And so, without ever making a single overtly evil choice, we may still wake up one day, unrecognizable to ourselves. Here's the philosophical horror. We can become bad without ever feeling bad, because we lie to ourselves, because we think we're still the same person, because we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their actions. And the longer we cling to the belief that goodness is our default setting, the more blind we become to the small corruptions already taking root within us. So the question remains, if the world is full of unconscious forces, psychological, philosophical, societal, that are constantly reshaping us, then how much of you is actually you? And if your values, your morality, your sense of right and wrong are all vulnerable to manipulation, fear, and illusion, what anchors you? What protects you from the slow, invisible descent into becoming the very thing you once despised? These aren't academic questions. They are existential alarms, and they point toward a far deeper problem. Not just that people change, but that they don't know they've changed until it's far too late. You don't wake up evil. You wake up efficient, respected, productive, just another cog turning inside a machine that rewards functionality over reflection. And that's the genius of the trap. The descent into moral collapse isn't loud, it's silent. It comes with praise, promotions, likes, applause. It comes in the form of success. By the time you realize what you've become, the applause has grown so loud that it drowns out the sound of your own conscience. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance, that quiet war between what we believe and what we do. The brain hates contradictions. It will twist logic, memory, and perception to preserve a sense of inner harmony. If you see yourself as a good person, but your actions suggest otherwise, your brain doesn't rush to correct your behavior. It rewrites the story. You didn't betray a friend. You had no choice. You didn't exploit your position. You were just being strategic. You didn't lie. You protected them from the truth. This self-deception is not a glitch. It is adaptive. Evolution wired us not for truth, but for survival. And survival in the modern world often means preserving your social standing, your job, your narrative. Moral clarity doesn't pay the bills, but performance does. This is how neuroplasticity becomes complicit. Your brain reshapes itself based on repeated behavior. The first time you cut corners, you feel guilt. The second time, less so. Eventually, the neural pathways of justification solidify. You become used to it. What once felt unthinkable now feels normal. Here's the consequence. Badness becomes a habit, disguised as efficiency. Now zoom out. Move from the individual to the collective. Imagine a society where everyone is just slightly off course, where the line between convenience and corruption is so blurry that no one notices when they've crossed it. A doctor overprescribes a drug because the rep is friendly. A politician twists a fact to protect the greater good. A CEO lays off thousands to increase shareholder value. No one feels evil. They feel justified. Cultural conditioning reinforces this. You've been taught since birth to be liked, to follow rules, to succeed. Questioning authority is rude. Going against the grain is risky. Being moral is fine, as long as it doesn't get in the way. And if it does, you're told to be realistic. The hidden lesson: conscience is optional, conformity is survival. Even institutions built to protect goodness, schools, religions, governments, often become vectors of control. They teach compliance, not critical thought. They reward obedience, not introspection. Slowly, the individual dissolves into a role, a function, a label. You're no longer a person with a soul. You're a product with a purpose. Take the bystander effect. When people witness wrongdoing in a group, each person assumes someone else will act. The more people present, the less likely anyone intervenes. This psychological paralysis explains how atrocities unfold in public without resistance. The horror isn't just that people do bad things, it's that good people watch and do nothing. Or consider in-group bias. We unconsciously favor people who belong to our tribe, our nation, our ideology. The other becomes less human, less deserving. This bias fuels everything from racial profiling to political polarization to war crimes. When morality becomes tribal, cruelty feels righteous. There's a term in behavioral economics called moral licensing. When you do something good, you feel entitled to a moral pass. You donated to charity, so it's fine to cheat on your taxes. You stood up for justice online, so you can ignore your toxic behavior offline. The mind keeps score in a rigged game. Good deeds are used to launder bad ones. And it doesn't stop there. With the rise of algorithmic echo chambers, even your conscience is no longer your own. Social media doesn't reward nuance or compassion. It rewards outrage, moral posturing, and tribal aggression. You're fed a stream of content that confirms your biases and frames the opposition as morally depraved. You begin to believe it. You become it. You attack, you cancel, you shame, all in the name of justice. But somewhere along the way, you lose the ability to see yourself clearly. Here's the consequence that few dare to name. The better you believe yourself to be, the less you question your actions. You become immune to feedback, immune to doubt. And doubt, ironically, is what keeps us human. It's what holds us back from becoming tyrants. The person who still wrestles with their choices, who still feels the sting of guilt, who still asks, was that right? That person still has a soul. But the one who never doubts, who is always certain of their virtue, that person is dangerous. The tragedy is not only personal, it's structural. We build systems around this blindness. We incentivize it. We praise the employee who gets things done, even if it means cutting ethical corners. We admire the leader who takes decisive action, even if it leads to suffering. We elect the politician who says what we're all thinking, even if it erodes truth. And then we wonder why corruption spreads, why cruelty becomes normalized, why the line between right and wrong becomes so foggy we can't even find our way back. But make no mistake, this fog has weight. It settles in your bones. It corrodes the parts of you that once felt alive, principled, awake. The unseen consequence of becoming bad is not just that you hurt others, it's that you forget how to feel. You become efficient but hollow, respected but afraid, powerful but ashamed to be alone in your thoughts. And when the silence comes, when the phone stops ringing, when the applause fades, when the mask begins to crack, you are left with the one person you cannot escape, yourself. But by then, the damage may be irreversible. You've trained your brain to ignore discomfort. You've taught your heart to beat behind armor. You've told your soul to stay quiet. And it listened. Still, something stirs beneath the numbness. A whisper, a dissonance, a hunger for something lost. You don't know what it is yet, but the illusion is beginning to break. The system that shaped you is revealing its cost. The comfort it gave you now feels like a cage. And somewhere deep in the silence, a question begins to form. Is it too late to change? You can feel it now, the quiet ache, the dissonance that won't go away. Something inside you is stirring. A part of you, long buried under compliance and convenience, is beginning to remember what it means to resist. And that's where the rebellion begins, not with protest signs or slogans, but with a moment of brutal honesty. I became what I once despised. This is not a confession. It's an awakening. Because here's the radical truth. You are not your past behavior. You are your capacity to choose differently now. To break free, you must first shatter the most insidious lie of all, that morality is fixed, that good people are always good, that bad people are irredeemable, that your fate is sealed by what you've done or failed to do. But morality is not a trait. It is a practice, a daily choice, a war fought in moments when no one is watching. Carl Jung called this the integration of the shadow. The act of facing your darkness instead of hiding it. He believed that true moral strength isn't found in those who suppress their urges, but in those who confront them with clarity. In Jung's words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That is the rebellion. To look at the parts of yourself you were told to hate and reclaim them with responsibility. You were trained to believe that goodness is meek, submissive, agreeable. But the world doesn't need more agreeable people. The world needs people of conscious power, individuals who have faced their capacity for harm and chosen integrity. Nietzsche warned against what he called slave morality, a morality born not of strength, but of resentment, submission, and fear. It is the morality of those who obey because they are afraid to disobey. But true virtue, Nietzsche argued, comes not from repression, but from sublimation, from transforming one's instincts into higher forms of expression. The goal is not to be harmless. The goal is to be powerful and choose restraint. To wield fire and not burn the world with it. So how do you reclaim your soul in a world that teaches you to trade it for likes, promotions, and applause? You begin by breaking the cycle of unconscious behavior. The most counterintuitive step, radical stillness. In a world that rewards constant action, doing nothing becomes revolutionary because stillness makes space for awareness, and awareness is dangerous to the system, to your conditioning, to your ego. Sit in silence. No distractions, no screens, just you. You will feel the discomfort rush in, the guilt, the shame, the questions you've been drowning in dopamine and busyness. Don't run. Listen, because underneath the noise is the truth you've been avoiding, and the clarity that can set you free. From this stillness, begin the practice of ruthless self-honesty. Ask questions that crack your illusions. What story am I telling myself to justify this behavior? Who benefits from me staying asleep? What would I do if I wasn't afraid of losing approval? And then, dare to act. Not performatively, not for validation, but because you know it's right even if no one ever sees it. This is what Viktor Frankl meant when he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Freedom doesn't come from changing the world. It comes from reclaiming that space, choosing your response with integrity. History is full of those who did exactly that. Sophie Scholl, a German student in Nazi Germany, chose to resist the regime with handwritten leaflets. She was executed at 21. Her last words, "Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go. What does my death matter, if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" She didn't have power. She had conviction. Diogenes, the Greek philosopher, rejected materialism and power entirely. He lived in a barrel and once told Alexander the Great to stand out of my sunlight. He rebelled not through violence, but through radical detachment from society's illusions. Søren Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, believed that truth must be lived, not merely known. That each individual must face the dizziness of freedom, the terror and ecstasy of being truly responsible for their own soul. These weren't saints. They were rebels, and their rebellion began where yours can begin too, with the refusal to lie to themselves. Once you begin living from that place, everything changes. You no longer seek validation, you seek alignment. You no longer obey blindly, you examine everything. You no longer fear your shadow, you integrate it. And most importantly, you stop asking, "What will they think of me?" You start asking, "Can I live with myself if I don't do this?" That question alone can rebuild your moral compass from the ruins. But be warned, breaking free will cost you. It may cost you friends who were comfortable with your silence. It may cost you promotions that required moral compromise. It may cost you the illusion of being nice or well-liked, but in return you gain something rare, something sacred. The ability to look in the mirror and feel proud of who's staring back. So rebel, not with noise, but with conscience, not with rage, but with clarity. Not to destroy the world, but to rebuild yourself. You were not born to be a product. You were not meant to spend your life quietly decaying behind a mask. You're not here to be liked. You are here to become whole. And sometimes to become whole, you must be willing to be misunderstood, feared, even hated, because the path to your own redemption is not paved with comfort. It is forged in fire. And if you choose to walk it, not only will you save yourself, you might just give others the courage to follow. What if you've misunderstood evil your entire life? Not as a monstrous force that lives out there in criminals and tyrants, but as something quieter, closer, so close, in fact, that it wears your face when you lie to yourself, smiles through your compromises, sleeps beside your dreams, whispering, "It's not the right time." What if the scariest truth isn't that good people can become bad, but that they already are, in ways they've never dared to see? You were taught that evil is dramatic, war, genocide, cruelty, but that's only its final form. Before it becomes a headline, it begins in hesitation. In the moment you know the right thing to do, and you don't do it. That's the birthplace of corruption, not hatred but apathy, not fire but numbness. Here is the ultimate truth. The line between good and evil does not run between people. It runs through every human heart. That includes yours. You are both the jailer and the prisoner, both the betrayer and the betrayed, both the hopeful child and the weary cynic. You contain the full spectrum. And until you stop trying to prove you're one of the good ones, until you stop externalizing the rot, you will never be free from it. That's the final deception this world plays on you. It tricks you into fighting external villains so you never confront the internal one. But the true battle is not against a corrupt system or a cruel leader or even a broken culture. It is against the parts of yourself that made peace with those things. You want a revolution? Then realize this. You cannot destroy evil by hating it. You can only destroy it by removing its hiding place within you. That is the shift, the paradigm collapse, the moment where the mirror becomes sharper than any sword. Because once you understand that evil is not a force, but a failure to act, a surrender to fear, a silence too long maintained, then every moment becomes a choice between creation and decay. And you begin to see the truth. Evil doesn't need monsters. It just needs you to be tired, distracted, afraid of losing what little comfort you have, willing to look away, just this once. This is what Sartre meant when he said, "We are our choices, not our intentions, not our beliefs, not our social media bios or what we say when the cameras are on. We are what we do." Especially when no one is watching. You want to be good? Then stop waiting to feel like a good person. Start behaving like one, even when it hurts, even when it costs you, especially then. Because every time you act in alignment with your deepest values, you reclaim a piece of your soul from the shadows. But don't mistake this path for a romantic one. There is no applause in integrity, no standing ovation for self-reform. You will not be praised for walking away from toxic systems. You will be punished. You may lose status, you may lose friends, you may lose comfort, but what you gain is something worth everything, an unshakable self, a life you can look at without flinching, a legacy built not on image, but on truth, a freedom that cannot be bought or taken, because it was never anyone else's to give. And so the final, most powerful realization is this: your life is a moral story, not in some religious sense, not judged by heaven or history, but by the quiet reckoning inside you, the one voice that knows when you've compromised too much. The true tragedy is not that good people become bad. The tragedy is that they don't even notice it happening. They laugh a little less. They sleep a little worse. They rationalize more. They love themselves less, but they pretend they don't feel it. And then one day they wake up and it's too late. They've become something they never meant to be. And no one screamed, no alarm rang, only silence. But not you, because now you know. Now you see. And with that awareness comes a question, one that will echo through every decision you make from this day forward. Will you betray yourself again? Not your job, not your image, not your tribe, yourself. Will you say yes when everything inside screams no? Will you smile when you know it's a lie? Will you let the world decide who you are just because it's easier? Or will you stop the drift? Will you stand up, trembling but firm, and say, "I choose a different path"? Not because it's easier, not because it will make you look good, but because you are done trading pieces of your soul for approval. So now the story shifts from a warning to a decision, because this isn't just a philosophical exercise. This is your life. And whether you realize it or not, you are always becoming. There is no pause, no neutrality, no hiding behind indecision. Every small act either shapes you toward your highest truth or chisels you into something you won't recognize. You are being sculpted by your habits, your values, your silences. The only question is, are you the sculptor or just the stone? And so you return to the same mirror, but this time you look deeper. And you ask, gently, seriously, what have I become? And what do I want to become next? Because in that moment you are no longer drifting, you are awake, and the rebellion has begun inside you forever.